So nearly a year ago to the day, I think it was January 28th of 2022, I released a video going over some special tech that you could use on poison characters that the poison necromancer I've been enjoying the entire time. And it was this idea of using Death's Web or swapping to it to cheat out a ton of additional poison damage. And where this was most applicable was on the Plague Javazon. We had just received a big buff for how Plague was going to work. It looked like it was going to be a pretty high tier build, and about a year has gone by. There have been some changes to the game, been messing around with some stuff with the hustle rune word and pre-buffing. And some of my understandings just about how like some of the deeper mechanics of this game have kind of bloomed. And I wanted to take another look at the Plague Javazon. So what I have for you right now is a super budget version of it, a wicked high budget version of it, kind of the ideas that we've been mulling over that make it a really nice build, and what a lot of the great applications are. So if you've been interested in remembering the Javazon build that everybody always forgets about, come learn about the Plague Javazon. So especially on a budget, the Plague Javazon has a really simple game plan. It's throw a Plague Javelin and then weapon swap, but we'll get to that in a quick second. When we talk about the skill build priority order, especially on lower level, you need to be able to max out your Plague Javelin, max out your Poison Javelin, and then you're also going to want to max out Penetrate and Pierce. And you might be asking yourself, well, why do you need Penetrate? You really don't need to hit with Plague Javelin. And that's the first thing that I wanted to touch on. But let's finish going over the gear and the attributes, and then we'll get into the mechanics. For our gear, I took the high budget version of what we were using and I chopped them all down to their budget alternatives. So instead of using ridiculous javelins, we're just using plain titans. Valkyrie's wing with a 3/3 facet. All of the facets that I'm using are all 3/3. These are the minimum value for a facet, and at this point basically costs nothing. And even at the beginning of a ladder, low 3/3 poison facets effectively have no value. Peace, super easy to make. Amara's, obviously this could be any +2 to Amazon amulet. This one was just simple enough to throw onto the build. Basic spirit, Silkweaves to be able to handle the mana issues, which you don't really have, especially once we talk about the swap tech, but there's still nice versions of it. Razortail to hit max pierce. 320 gloves, these could be 220 gloves. They could be 220 crafted gloves with knockback, but something that you can just go shop. Ravenfrost for cannot be frozen, Nagelring for your magic find. We have plain skillers across the bottom, using a Geeds, an Annie, and a Torch. Obviously your mileage will vary on when you pick up these items. After about a week, maybe 2 weeks, none of these are really considered expensive items at the beginning of a ladder season start, and all of these could have been min roll values as well. Now here's where the build gets interesting, and if you haven't seen my previous video, I'll explain why you're seeing very specifically a minimum roll Death's Web on this character. So when I say minimum roll here, I mean for the plus to skills as well as the life and the mana. Obviously for our purposes, all we really need is that minus enemy resistance. So if you're looking to buy one of these, that's the number that you would worry about. An even cheaper alternative, again, depending on what part of the ladder you're in, would be making a Plague Rune Word. And an even cheaper option than that would actually just be a 6-socketed crystal sword that you filled up with whatever poison facets you could get your hands on, but you can see how you can get cheaper and cheaper versions of these items. Across from the Death's Web, you have a plain Monarch with, again, the same 3/3 poison facets in it. This could be a kite shield if you don't have enough to start off with. We're on players 8 right now, and what I want to do is I'm going to just throw Plague Javelins at this Eldritch pack until they die. We need attack rating, so when the Javelin hits, it will pierce and then hopefully apply poison to everybody behind it as well. So I'm going to walk up to Eldritch, I'm going to throw a spear at him, and you'll see how quickly the poison damage is being applied, right? Looking at it, we've almost killed everybody who is within the poison. And it took a couple seconds. Let me show you the exact same thing, but after I throw my javelin, watch me just weapon swap over to Death's Web. So here, I'm gonna throw the same javelin, and then I'm just going to swap to Death's Web. And as I die here, you notice that people are dying significantly faster than they were before. Plague Javelin is going to leave behind a cloud of poison, which you can see right here. This poison will continue to try to apply to any monsters that are within it. And then it checks the monster's resistance. So if a monster had 0 resistance and I have a single facet on, because they're at 0, you're bringing them down to -3, I'm going to increase your damage again by 3%. If they had more resistance, it actually increases it by more. So think about it this way. If a monster had 99 resistance, that means they're only taking 1% of my total damage. If I put on a single facet, and they're now taking 4% of my total damage, that's a 400% increase in the total amount of damage that I did to them. It will try to reapply poison damage every single frame that the monster is sitting in the cloud. It checks my skill damage and the monster's resistance every time it tries to reapply. Throw out my Plague Javelin, and then swap over to something that has minus 65 resistance in this case, as well as an additional 15% poison damage. It will check my skill level in the initial damage, which was 74. Then it will look at my additional plus 15 poison damage and increase it. And then it will see that the monster has minus 65 resistance, so it'll increase it even further. Now, this wouldn't work for a poison source that's just on the target. It's very specifically because the poison cloud keeps reapplying every frame. Another facet of how poison damage works is the idea of poison length reduction. Remember that stat you always find on your boots or you see on Venom Ward and you go, what does this do? You put it on, you still die to Endariel, and you go, oh, okay, basically nothing. Monsters have 0 poison length reduction. Every minus enemy resistance, so in this case, just looking at this item, minus 53%, reduces their poison length reduction. You have a negative cap of minus 100. So if you're at minus 100 poison length reduction, poison is applied to you for twice as long without diluting the damage at all. In our example, Plague Javelin will apply for 11 seconds. But if the monster has minus 100 poison length reduction, it will apply for 22 seconds at the same damage rate, effectively doubling how much total damage you do to them. So to quickly recap that, basically what you need to do on a Plague Javelin to get the most damage possible is use the most plus skills possible, and then swap to as much minus enemy res and plus elemental damage that you can. Now, the second part, and the thing that's going to effectively be the evolution of this video guide on how to play this character, is my better understanding of the fact that Plague Javelin, along with your character screen, oddly enough, are both lying to you. Plague Javelin says that it adds 426% attack rating. And that's awesome. Let's go ahead and look at our attack rating. So you'll notice that our base attack rating, so this is without using anything else, just how much attack rating I have, plus our penetrate skill, I have about 4,000 AR. So at level 90, I have a 77% chance of hitting a burning dead archer out in the frigid highlands. Plague Javelin, with its 8,000 AR, says I have an 88% chance to hit. That's 11% chance increase to hit. The reason why chance to hit is so important is because you have to be able to successfully hit a target to pierce a target. So rather than the Plague Javelin just stopping at the first enemy and potentially not spreading behind it, a higher chance to hit means that we can successfully pierce, it'll go through them and extend the cloud. But of course it's lying. Just like everything else on the lying character screen, Plague Javelin's attack rating has been bugged all the way back from LOD, and when they updated the skill in patch 2.4, they never addressed it. So as it stands right now, Plague Javelin still does not have the increased attack rating from the skill tooltip. What that means is when I'm using Plague Javelin, even though it says I have an 88% chance to hit here, I actually have a 77% chance. And while that might not seem significant, it drastically reduces our efficiency for spreading the plague's poison cloud as far as possible. The sooner a monster is in the poison cloud, the sooner that we can swap to Death's Web and have them get the increased poison rate and increased poison damage. It also means that if we are actually missing a lot more than we think we are, the game also lies to us there as well. The weird part about how Pierce works is that the game rolls whether or not you hit and whether or not you pierce in the same formula. So if you actually miss your target but succeed at the pierce, the game generates a fake, non-existent projectile that looks like it's piercing and doing stuff, when in reality it isn't. So not only are you missing more often than you think, applying the poison cloud over a smaller area than you think, but there's no way for you to see it in-game unless you watch each individual monster and whether or not they take damage when a piercing projectile successfully hits them. Now, all of that's a little bit difficult to really conceptualize what it means, but let me just run around a cow game right now, and I'll kind of vocalize the things that you need to be conscientious of as I'm going through it. So as I run through this cow level, basically what you would do with Plague Javelin is you would throw ahead of you and then run monsters through it. Very tedious, difficult to actually get good enough spread, but the major problem is you couldn't successfully hit so you often weren't piercing all of the time. And if it just stops right at the first monster and nobody else gets affected by it, it's really, really inefficient. Now keep in mind I'm on players 8 here. So what you would do is, even on this same build, and they're still dying, which is kind of funny, you would throw your Plague Javelin, walk them through it, and as you're walking them through it, take out your Death Sweat. The kill speed there isn't that impressive, but it's because we have to be so inefficient with how we're applying the Plague Javelin. Because every time it just stops at the first monster and doesn't actually pierce, you'll notice that's actually much, much harder for me to target. But if I run around in this very circuitous kiting fashion, I can at least make sure that everybody gets into the poison cloud for at least part of its duration. Here's where being able to manage our attack rating becomes so important. And there's a really, really simple fix. The answer is Demon Limb. Demon Limb is going to apply a very long buff, I think it's 11 minutes, with a massive amount of attack rating. So let's go ahead, throw it on, quickly pre-buff, and then see what our chance to hit looks like now as opposed to what it was before. So we have an 81% chance to hit these cows, 4,000 attack rating, remembering that this is lying right now and we actually don't have this 90% chance to hit. Enchant myself. And now we're up to 6,400 attack rating with an 87% chance to hit. Now with enough chance to hit, we can reliably just toss the javelin into the pack behind us and easily swap. And you notice how much faster these packs are dying because our javelin is able to go straight through their group, apply their poison to everybody in it, and I don't have to serpentine through, and all of them are just going to die from this singular javelin that we just threw. Now you might be asking yourself, Mac, why don't you have a mercenary? Honestly, on budget gear, a mercenary kind of doesn't do anything for you. While I was playing, the mercenary just kind of dies, and this is on players 8, keep this in mind, players 8 the entire time. Mercenary will force the cows to try to aggro onto them and attack them instead, meaning that they won't run in the directions that you want. Not only that, the only mercenary that would really be beneficial is actually an Act 1 mercenary with Harmony to increase your run speed. The problem being that she typically gets gacked, especially if you're on budget gear, on higher player count. And the whole point of this build is to be able to run a decent amount of magic find, clear high density, high value areas, as well as be able to move quickly. And if I have to worry about my mercenary ruining my kiting, as well as just dying all the time, it's just not worth it. Now that you've learned how the build works, what the budget gear looks like, how to basically play it in high value areas like the cow level, you can also take it into Chaos Sanctuary, and I'm about to show you that on the especially powerful gear because it's kind of impressive how quickly you can chaos prep even on players 8. But I'll go ahead and show you a whole run of that because it takes less than a minute. Let's go ahead and talk about the high-end gear on this build and how nutty it gets, and then also your mercenary option there. This gear is disgusting. It's hero edited, this is single player, but this is what the top end version of the gear would look like for this character. We start off with 640s. I know. You could literally buy a whole ladder if you had a pair of these, but quite literally they are the best in slot. Honestly, you don't really need them here. Titans still work just fine. But if we're talking about most disgusting option, these would be it. Here we have a 220 circlet, 2 sockets, all res, absolutely disgusting. We're gonna put 2 facets in it as well. I would like this to have 30% fast run walk. Obviously, we're keeping the spirit shield at a 35 FCR. It's gonna be required for the breakpoint. Using Enigma for teleport. We have a 220 all res strength amulet. Again, this thing's absolutely nutty. We're keeping on the silkweaves. Quite frankly, it doesn't really matter what boots you have on here. I guess you throw on war traps for more magic find, but this is nice to never have mana issues. A 10 FCR with telekinesis, all res dex ring, arachnid mesh for the FCR breakpoint and the plus skill, stone of Jordan, and then the same 320s. We swap out all of the skillers down below for skillers with life, and then 5 all res 7 magic find charms as well. On swap, we're using a perfect death web. The only thing that matters here is the increase in the life and the mana gain per kill. The plus skill doesn't have any impact on us at all. And we're using a Jeweler's Monarch of Deflection because if you can have a J mod, you might as well use a J mod. The skills are oddly enough pretty similar. We're still going to max out Poison Javelin and Plague Javelin. We're still going to max out Penetrate as well as Pierce, and then we're going to pick up Dodge, Evade, and Avoid. The only thing here is that we are going to drop all of our dump points into Lightning Fury. If you do not worry about the Penetrate here, if you don't worry about this attack rating at all, which you don't technically have to, it's just suboptimal, you can increase the amount of damage that you get on your Lightning Fury by moving those points into the Synergy Lightning Bolt. For our stats, we are putting points into dexterity. I put in enough points into dexterity so I'd be sitting at around 5,000 attack rating without any buffs on, so that when we use Demon Limb for pre-buffing, we're sitting around 8,000 AR, and then you put the rest into your life. Our resistances are doing pretty well. Honestly, this build really shouldn't be getting hit unless you're going to go do these Players 8 seal popping chaos prep runs that I'll show you in a quick second. But this is more than enough life even without battle commands and battle order because of the absolute ridiculous survivability that dodge, evade, and avoid get us. The mercenary is where we start talking about some pretty niche items. We want him to be using Plague. Why Plague? Because lower resist will reduce poison resistance, increasing the damage that we deal. Being able to build them into ethereal mystic swords means that they also have a decent amount of weapon damage, so he can actually survive himself. He's using an Eth Ariats, and then he's using a Fortitude as well. You would also want this to be ethereal. I put a Burr rune into the Ariats because we typically run him with a Shaft Stop with a Cham rune in it for chaos, which you need a lot of physical damage for him to not get popped by Lord Desace's pack. But this setup here means that as you're running by, he'll typically be running behind you, getting hit and proccing lower res a decent amount of time, since with 2 of these on, he has a 40% chance of proccing it. But let's go ahead and show that exact same cow run and how much more fluid and precise we can be when the build has a nutty amount of additional survivability, skills, and minus enemy res. So walking into these packs, we throw a single javelin, we swap over to Death's Web, and we literally run away. By the time we get to the next pack, the ones behind us should be dying, unless they are like a champion or an elite pack, and then when lower res pops off, you'll notice that it is even more efficient. Sometimes I like to throw one more behind just to make sure that I didn't miss any stragglers. It also gives my mercenary a little bit of time to catch up with me, because I kind of want him to be right next to me as we're running. You notice that I immediately swap after I throw, just so that even the initial poison damage might be directly affected by the Death's Web, so that there's no downtime on maximum poison damage potential. Since you can solo P8 everything here on the Amazon, you could also employ this with a group of friends, like if you have a good season start, where you could have barbarians running behind you and just horking as long as they're not within the aggro range. Like if I throw one into a next clean pack here, swap over to Death's Web, you'll see without doing anything else, they are all going to die. So you actually don't have to wait for them to die. You can completely go through and clear everything, and then either have a party of people just picking up after you, or do your swap through later on and actually sweep through and make sure that you haven't missed any good drops. If you're somebody who really wants to see the pack die, what I actually recommend is that after you get the poison up and you do your Death's Web swap, actually swapping over to Lightning Fury and just peppering a few of those in there. While the lightning damage on frames where it hits will impede your poison damage is going to be ticking on every other frame where lightning isn't being applied. So if I show you an example here, just get my poison up on each pack, and then I finish, especially with that lower res, and then I clean up the rest of the pack so I don't have to worry about it. There was one other thing that I've messed around with, and sadly it does not work well on the Plague Javazon, and I really wish that it did, but it's actually the use of Marowak for the aggroing and grouping of cows to be able to hit them with all the poison damage. Oddly enough, all of the monsters being in one place and your mercenary getting stuck with them is a reduction in overall efficiency for the build, as well as needing to wait around for them to walk towards the bone prison, as opposed to meeting them head on and then actually chucking spears in before they've even fully aggroed onto you. But once we get to the end of this run, which I think was what, like 2-3 minutes, we might have a couple stragglers, like 1 or 2. But here's all your loot. Run through, pick it all up. You can actually teleport through at this point with your pretty decent teleport frames and just notice really quickly if there's anything on the ground that you want. So in Season 1, my team, with Teo being the person who actually reached it, we're the fastest level 99 in Season 1. In Season 3, we're going to be pushing for the fastest level 99 too. And the way that you accomplish that before Terror Zones was in hyper-efficient Players 8 seal popping and chaos to get Diablo ready. We were doing 30-second games with a full 8-player team where we had 3 paladins, 4 sorceresses, and then any additional characters that we could get into the game to literally go out and snipe each individual seal boss and get Teo into the game fast enough. And those were 30-second Diablos. Now, I've done a lot of runs here. The average is around 57 seconds, with the longer end being about a minute and 3 seconds, and the fastest I've completed a run was closer to 50 seconds. But let me just show you what just doing a P8 chaos seal pop technique to get Diablo spawned as fast as possible looks like on a poison javelins on. So starting the clock here, we're at a random part of my recording that I'll just need to remember. It was about 43:30, and I'll just remember that as we go. So the idea of these runs was to get the seal bosses killed as fast as possible, so that Teo could walk in and kill Diablo. So we have the seal boss right here. Toss. It's already dead. I didn't even need to toss that second javelin. Come up here, make sure that this area isn't super hot. Might Aura along with Desace is a little bit nutty. Okay, perfect. Wow, this is a gross chaos. Almost dead, and then we can move on. Remember, no call to arms here. No pre-buffing other than Demon Limb. Just need to get our Javelin onto Infector Souls over there. If we could actually get our Mercenary closer to him, that would be nice, because we can get the lower res proc on him. Okay, that was 1 minute 10 seconds, well 1 minute 8 seconds, and that was with Might Aura spawn both at Grand Vizier as well as Lord Desace, and then a pretty bad spawn here as well as far as efficiency is concerned. There you go. That's my Plague Javazon. That's the update from over a year ago. We finally added some new tech to it to make it that much more efficient. Absolutely love this build. The budget version is actually pretty nutty for how cheap it is and how effective it is as well. Even if all you do is just farm Nightmare and then Hell Cows and you're somebody who can't get enough of that, I think that Plague Javazon has a really nice place in the early game of the ladder season to be able to survive and capitalize very well on all of the different charms that people are trying to buy up to get enough power so that they can transition into terror zones. There you go. I hope that you enjoyed this build review, because I realized that there are so many facets to Diablo 2 that are really, really difficult to quantify. It's hard to notice the difference between 5 and 10% chance to hit. It's really difficult to notice the difference between an amount of minus resistance versus a different one versus a percentage increase in elemental damage. But when you sit down and really crunch the numbers, these new ideas and these better min-max and optimization options come out of it. And I was just really, really intrigued what it would look like on this build a year later. And I hope that you enjoyed it. Thank you so much for watching this video. I look forward to seeing you in the next one.